20. LIFFe. Jubilejni 20. Ljubljanski mednarodni filmski festival. Od srede 11. do nedelje 22. novembra.
It's a story about a girl that finds somebody really close to her. It's sort of that she's finding love, but she doesn't really realize that she's looking for it. It's more about just trying to create that feeling of what she's going through. So it's trying to, for me, I was like thinking of trying to capture that, how she feels, but from outside looking at her versus being inside her. Well, I had been working on another film for a long time, and that film got put on hold. And that day was really bad for me. And so I went for this long walk, and I thought about, well, it was the first time I could think of a different project suddenly, because that film got put on hold for a year. So it's like the film was ready to go, but I couldn't do any more work on it. And up to that point, like, I'd spent all my energy trying to make that film happen and working on that film. So suddenly, even though it was this bad day, I also felt this sort of like elation of like this weight had been lifted off, that I could think of something else. And then there was a certain time period, like I had to make a film in a year, and that seemed like exciting, like an interesting sort of challenge and something that was exciting. And at the end of this walk, I thought about Zoe, who had auditioned for the other film, and I called and asked if she wanted to work on something together. And she was like, "What's it about?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And she says, "Okay, let's do it." I didn't think about this at the time about writing it, but when I was her age, if I was waiting for somebody to call me, I never knew if they had called or not during the day. I would go home and then you would check your answering machine, and if they hadn't called, you could still call them back because maybe they called and didn't leave a message. There's no way of the phone doesn't record phone numbers or keep track of things like that. I think the protocol of staying in touch with somebody was different when the technology was less advanced. But nowadays, you're constantly connected to somebody or not connected. Like if they haven't called, you know they haven't called, and I think that creates a different form of anxiety. This film was really different for me though, because it was like somebody that's outside of me. It's like for me, she's a character that I admire, somebody that I want to learn from. You know, that's part of the process of making this film was creating a character that was different than me, but somebody that I felt that I respected and wanted to be more like her. And so in that way, I think making this film for me was a way of trying to tell, you know, you think about yourself, people think about the good qualities they have and the bad qualities they have. And I think this film for me was a way of trying to heal some of the things that I feel my bad qualities. Like for me, it's like I want to imagine some place that I haven't been before, or a person that is unlike me, and then you find the commonness between yourself and that person, because automatically you're writing for them, you're thinking in their head, right? And in that way you're learning something about yourself, but you're also hopefully trying to find something that's like a little bit more universal, like what's common about me and this person is hopefully common about me and everybody else. You know, that there's some sort of connection. Does that make sense? Like if it's just you, it's a point. It's going out nowhere, really. It's just kind of focused on yourself. But if it's like you and somebody else, there's like a line between you and that other person. And that's a certain sort of like, okay, you know, we're like this, you know, and then hopefully you find other audience members that are like, oh, I'm like this too. You know, I don't think I make films that are for everybody. There's a Japanese comic book artist, Rumiko Takahashi. She did Inuyasha, I think is her most famous comic book. Ranma One Half and Mason Ikuku. I would like to work with her on a script. Like, I have an idea for like a Japanese sort of like weird, she makes these really interesting stories which are similar in that they're love stories, but they have a lot of fantastical elements. Like the guy turns into a girl when you pour hot water on him, and his father turns into a panda, and it's like, all these things are really weird, but the basis of it is something that I think I'm really interested in, which is this, like, you're in love with somebody, and how do you say it? It's really awkward if they're too close to you. And I think she is capturing that in a different way. I studied architecture when I first started school, and then it wasn't fulfilling enough. And so I decided to leave to study art, and I started studying sculpture, conceptual sculpture, which is why I like this like Chris Burden a lot. And I think I also liked film at the time, and started studying experimental film in school. And after graduating, decided that I would study film more than sculpture, because you can't really get a job in sculpture, and it seemed like I also didn't know that much about film, and there was like a process to learn, you know. I like watching a film and it feels like it's found, not the person was telling you something, but it feels like the filmmaker was looking for something in the process of making a film. Like they didn't know exactly what they were looking for when they were starting, but they were like following a certain instinct, and then you feel these like spontaneous moments that are like, it's not a perfect film. You know, if it's too perfect and it's like all connected, those can be really rewarding films as well, but the films that I really like respond to are the ones that are more broken and mended. I just got here and I just had the one screening, but you guys had this giant Slovenian Russian game last night, and I thought nobody would be at the screening. And I was really impressed that there were so many people there, because that's all I've heard about since I got here was the game. The game's on tonight, and like I watched the game. You know, when you're making films that are like more independent films, you start to think, who's watching these films? Because you talk to a distributor and they're like, nobody's watching. Everybody tells you nobody's watching them because they don't want to give you any money. But at the same time, then you travel around the world and you go to, like, you know, I was in Santiago, and it's like not just my film, but like every film there was packed, you know. Or you here in Ljubljana, it's like not just my film, but the other films I've attended as well were packed. And you really feel this sort of like there's a spirit of people everywhere that want to see films and that are going out and looking for them, and it makes you sort of inspired to continue. And I definitely feel here there's like, it's the people going to the festival, but it's also the organization of this festival. You could just tell it's really well organized, that it's not just this like love for cinema, but it's sort of respect for it as well.
Zaživite s festivalom.